lot of it is that everyone's complaining about mental stack from the day one, right? No one has it compiled yet. As a CS person, I know that you got to compile the stack.
Like you mentioned sports and then like being in the zone. Like that's a term commonly used in basketball, right?
Yeah.
Like when you're just like whatever you throw up, right? Like it's just it's going in the basket. It doesn't matter, right? All of our talk about mental stack and like reducing that or limiting that, it just made me think about like when it comes to basketball, right? It's 5-on-5, and a lot of teams don't run plays, right? When it comes down to it, and it's like the game's on the line. What do a lot of teams do? They give it to their best player, and they run what they call an isolation play. It's a one-on-one. So in that situation, like you're not dealing with the other four players. It's mano a mano, you versus this guy, and you're doing whatever you've learned up to that point to get a single shot off. That's a perfect parallel to reducing your mental stack, because at that point you're not worrying about everybody else. It's you versus this guy. Let me do whatever I've learned instinctually, muscle memory, my best move to get an open shot.
Welcome to the Absolute Guard podcast.
Yes, welcome. This is episode 44. My name is Benny, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host John, who's often imitated, never duplicated. How's it going, John?
I'm pretty good. I don't know what that saying means nowadays, but I definitely feel like I could be in multiple places at once today in particular. Oh man, how's your day going, Benny?
It's going great. Just found out today I'm officially a Twitch affiliate. So
hey, congratulations!
That's exciting news. Yeah, that's awesome.
Very cool. It's like a couple, like you have to have a certain amount of concurrent viewers and a certain amount of stream time too, right?
Yep.
What could you have possibly been streaming during all this?
I don't know. There was like a new game that came out. Was it Street Fighter 6? So I was kind of debating whether I was going to stream that at all, but I figured, hey, what the hell? Just kind of watching or tracking my progress personally, and it's been fun. And I think the one thing that if you watched my stream that you'll probably notice the most is that I roll my eyes really hard when I get drive impacted. Like every time. It doesn't matter the situation, whether I ate it because I messed up. The minute I see that and I know that I'm caught, I just roll my eyes.
I definitely have rolled my eyes during gameplay before too. That is definitely a thing, and drive impact is also just a hot button topic, I think, for a lot of people that are picking up this game. And in general, I think that's actually the theme of our show today, is talking about improvement methods. And we got a special guest on today. Welcome, Skills to Kills.
Hey, what's up?
How's it going?
What's up, AJ?
It's going pretty good, guys. Going pretty good. Been enjoying the game as well. Some game. I think it was Street Fighter 6 is the game that we are playing. That's the game, right?
Yes, that is the game. And part of the reason why, we were thinking about having you on is like you and I interacted this past weekend at a tournament, and I got to see like how you are learning this brand new game. And it's kind of an interesting like compare and contrast to how I learned the game, how Benny learns the game, and I feel like there's a lot of different ways that learning styles that people have, and different methodologies that resonate with everyone. So if we could just get right into it. So when we were playing Street Fighter 6, actually I want to take a step back even further and say, I remember on the show, your last episode, we were talking through Marvel, we were talking through Power Rangers, and kind of going through your history. And I think we also talked about the SOCD changes, and you kind of expressed a lack of interest in Street Fighter 6. And I was curious about what has changed your mind, and like what is keeping you coming back to the game right now.
Well, yeah, certainly. I think that even though that I was heavily skeptical, like to be generous about the game, I was always going to give it a fair try. And whenever I give a game a fair try, I always try my hardest, and I try to like the game. And Street Fighter 6 is, I almost came into it trying to hate on the game, trying to like not like the game because of everything that I saw from the esports angle. Obviously, SOCD changes I think are still pretty dumb. I think the way that they went about it was also pretty foul. And looking forward at the way that they're implementing their esports leagues in the future, there's probably some issues with that going forward. But once you can separate yourself from Capcom, right, versus Street Fighter 6, Street Fighter 6 is super interesting.
Nice.
Very,
cool.
Very interesting.
What about it interests you the most?
From how first, a lot of what I was judging was based off of open beta gameplay and stuff. Just you constantly see these matches and they're a little out of context. Now I see the players were really just trying to get a feel for the game. And then as such, you kind of overspend on drive gauge, and it looks like a really ugly game. It looks like people are constantly burning themselves out for no reason. And I thought this game looks really bad. But the second I saw some competent players play, you look at like a Daigo and a Tokido play, it started to click, and the resource management started to make a lot more sense. I thought the game also embraced a lot of external play styles too. Once I saw what JP could do, once I saw that Fireball's wars were just as active as ever, it was awesome. I knew that this game was going to be something I was gonna enjoy.
Nice. So has your opinion on Burnout changed then? Where is it worth burning out ever in your mind?
Oh, I honestly have no idea. The risk reward behind it is interesting to the point where I don't know if it's completely like it's a death sentence. It's not, right? Like sometimes it is worth it to burn out, but to pin down exactly when it is okay to burn out and when it isn't, that's a little harder. It seems to be okay to burn out if your character is okay and neutral and they can like get it back, or maybe you're closing out a round. That's actually super okay. If you're closing out a round, use all your drive bar, use all your bar,
sure.
your super bar, all that's good. What about you? How do you feel Burnout is in this game?
Right now, I think Burnout is, it's kind of how you described within the betas, where everybody is just kind of burning out willy-nilly right now because they're kind of just trying to see what's possible on the engine. And I mentioned it on the last show, but basically you can't know how to cross the line, or you can't know when to cross the line if you don't get right up to it. You have to like really test all your boundaries before you can really like build out a game plan. So I agree with you in that early gameplay, burn out freely because you're exploring all your options. But then over time, we've gotten better at punishing burnout, and I've lost entire rounds by burning out. I'll be in a massive lead and I'll be like, I'll just ride this out and burn myself out, and then I'll kill him before he can even have a chance to kill me, and that doesn't happen and I die. So I think that the player base has matured enough where they can punish burnout, as well as me understanding my limitations and being able to dial it back, but keeping it in your back pocket for that player expression you mentioned earlier, and being willing to burn out to make a statement instead.
Yeah, I have to, like, in terms of my personal playing, like, I'm not at the point, because like I've watched you play plenty of times, John, and like I've towards the end of the round I'll see your meter management, and it's like when it's time for you to burn everything and to use your level 3 or whatever, and it's just like, I know this is gonna kill. There's really no question for you at this point. Like, I'm not at that level just yet. Like, I kind of conserve my meter, and I'm like worried about kind of the loss of drive impact or anything, like the drive rush or anything else that I have. That the parry, that, and also like execution wise, I'm not there yet to where I'm comfortable, like, okay, this is the time for me to drive rush in and finish my plate and win this round. Like, I'll be like, let me take what I know I can consistently do for damage, and then hopefully I can get the rest of it out of there.
Okay, very cool. I think that like we kind of represent a bunch of different phases of learning. I think, as you mentioned, Benny, where you're still getting to the point where you're kind of feeling it out, and you're feeling out like what the damage per drive bar does. It's kind of like a return on investment thing. And I was curious about, but to AJ and to Benny here is like, you know, how are you trying to gauge that progress of like figuring that stuff out? How are you practicing right now? Benny, do you want to start?
Yeah. So for me, like, I talked about it briefly before. Like, you know, when I first got the game, my first thing was to jump into trials, right, and just kind of see what Capcom wanted this character to be able to do, like on a basic level. And then after that, you know, I kind of went into training mode, kind of looked at Twitter stuff just to kind of see what people were doing. And then after that, it took me a couple of days, but then I jumped into ranked and, you know, did my placement matches. I've been playing Sim a lot more than Honda at this point, but when I did his placement matches, like those were really rough. I think I won 2 out of the 10, and a lot of it was just being like I wasn't super comfortable with like just really anything. Like my punishes were kind of non-existent. Like my use of drive gauge was really non-existent, and I was just like, you know, I took my lumps, and I ended up like in silver. So you know, it was humbling, but at the same time, I was just like, well, this, you know, this is where I'm at, and like, you know, for me, that's part of the experience. Is like, you know, I wasn't gonna jump in and expect, okay, I'm gonna be in diamond right away, right? Like for me, like I knew right off the bat, like this was gonna take me a bit, and it had, you know, and I'm still, you know, at the point now where I feel like I think the most comfortable thing for me is to kind of just build little by little. Like initially, it was like I was playing Honda, right? And I was looking at all these combo possibilities and using the his install and everything. And I was like, how do I extend this combo? How do I do this? And I'm just like, I'm overwhelming myself with information and combos and all kinds of stuff that, you know, I'm not even ready to kind of implement at this point. So I kind of dialed it back a bit, just kind of went back to basics, and I was just like, all right, let me just anti-air and let me do kind of simple damage and cancels in the supers. And that I think for me personally has helped me the most, is because then now I'm kind of just gradually kind of like adding to my repertoire as I play. So it's like, okay, now I can do this hands combo. Okay, what did I see in the last video I saw? Oh, I can extend it with the stand short, and then I can do super after that, or I can do headbutt after that. Okay, here's a little bit. I'm squeezing out a little bit more damage here.
Okay, it kind of reminds me of like whatever martial arts cliche from a movie or something, where like somebody like blindfolds themselves and it's like, I need to train my other senses.
Yeah.
Where you're essentially like limiting yourself, or you're tunnel visioning on purpose, so that way you don't get overwhelmed by the whole wide world that's out there, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like, you know, I'm just trying to just, yeah, not overwhelm myself personally, because like I realized that was basically killing me in the game. I was thinking about too much stuff. I was worried about meter management. I was worried about maximizing damage, and it's like, you know what? Let me just kind of figure out the flow of this game and what works for me, and then, you know, we'll add from there and just progressively get better from there.
Very cool. AJ, how about you? How's your improvement methodology treating you, or like what is your improvement methodology since starting this game?
Yeah, well, my improvement methodology. Well, first it starts with just learning the game, figuring out if I even like it or not.
Mhm.
So a lot of that is just playing with the homies, picking a whole bunch of characters and just kind of screwing around. Just like Benny, I tried to go into the trials, figure out what Capcom thought the characters should do, and it lets you learn all the moves. And maybe with the frame counters and stuff, you know some basic frame data. Maybe it's not everything, but okay, jabs are 4 frames in this game, so I can get away with being minus sometimes. It's not Marvel where I'm -1 and I die, right? Like this is okay. So it's basic little knowledge checks like that I can get around. Then, if I've decided that I not only like the game, but I also want to commit to it competitively, then there's a whole thing that I got to do. Um, so I commit to a character. I've committed to Luke now.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah, a full commitment to Luke, and then I basically watch a bunch of VODs and stuff to figure out the game plan, the general game plan, the general archetypes of the characters. You know, just okay, he's a Shoto. I'm baiting jumps a bunch, and I'm looking for DPs. Okay, I'm in the building. You know, so I've got some kind of game plan.
sure.
Then BNBs. I learned a couple BNBs. Then I fight the CPU for a little bit so that I can actually hit. Yeah. So it's like confirms that aren't necessarily. I'm not just going into an online match and I'm like, oh my god, why can't I do my combos or anything? No, I will have my hit confirms down.
Okay, so you basically start with like putting yourself in a position of duress, so to speak, when playing the CPU and having to actually like grind it out in a match as opposed to labbing it out and then writing out a spreadsheet or something.
Well, the spreadsheet comes like right like after the CPU stuff happens, and I'm like, okay, so clearly this is like my best neutral starter. I'm getting like I'm doing this a lot, and so then the spreadsheet comes out and it's like, okay, this I need confirms off of this, and this, and then let's say I knock him down and then I'm getting DP'd all the time. Okay, now I need Oki. Now I am off of these situations, this, and this. Then when I go online, I always write down why I lose and stuff, and then that gives me opportunities to lab why I lost, and hopefully I don't lose the same way again, especially if it's something concrete like, oh, this button was actually negative. I didn't know it was negative. It turns out it's super duper negative and punishable. Some stuff like that. In terms of just kind of surface level improvement on my end.
It's a scientific methodology, if anything, where it's like you're finding problems to solve and build solutions for, right? And those problems might be, I need a BNB off of a specific starter, or you have different meter management issues, or like I need a BNB that with this particular situation with I need Oki. It seems like every time it's like intermixing. Both of you guys have this style, it sounds like, where you have this intermixing of real match play versus going back and then solving a problem, and then real match play, finding the problem, and then offline like solving it a different way, labbing it, writing it as a spreadsheet, etc.
Yeah, at least in the learning stage of the game, in the very early learning stage, that's the method that I take. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I part of the reason why I was like really intrigued by this is when we were playing this weekend. The contender had a farewell tournament this weekend. You had a notebook with you, and you wrote down like specific situations or tech or reasons why you lost. Could you give some examples of like what would be a reason why you lost, or like something you would write in your notebook?
All right. Yeah. The first thing is to like trust the person who beat you more than like yourself. So that's why I like asked the person, or asked you a lot why I lost, because one in particular, I'm like, okay, so my defense in this situation, I just wasn't familiar with the options, and that's why I lost. You said no, I burnt myself out, and thus I didn't have access to a whole bunch of options. So I wrote down, burn myself. Actually, this is in the weeds. This is crouch, medium kick, offensive options. Because what I was doing was I was always defaulting to go to drive rush from crouch, medium kick.
Right.
So, but that's just because I didn't know anything else at the time, and I didn't know how bad I was putting myself into that situation afterward.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one way.
Yeah, low forward DRC is a really potent tool in this game, but because it takes half your bar, like there's a specific time. Like I apply an algorithm to it where I need to have more than 4, I think, before I'm comfortable DRCing.
That's about what I'll do too.
Yeah, because you don't want to fall under 1, because even if you don't burn yourself out, you don't have access to parry. You might as well be burned out at that point, right?
Yep. Yeah. You basically have the 3 to like, oh, in case they're drive impacting me or something like that, or I really need to get someone off of me, So yeah, 4 or above. Another thing I was writing down was how solid your throw loop game or your Oki was. So I wrote down to work on Oki off of those situations, off of basic knockdowns. Range 0, I write down ranges where I'm losing a lot of the time too. If I don't really know exactly what's happening, I'm losing up close.
Yeah, could you describe like the different ranges on the screen that you would capture with these numbers here?
Yeah, it's a Tekken thing. They just describe it by like the number of backdashes between a character. Range 0 is right up close. Range 1, range 2, range 3, range 4, and so on. but usually you want to play range 2 or 3 in Tekken.
Okay.
Well, depending on the game. Now it's like you're pretty much right here and stuff, for a lot of the time.
Okay. Yeah, that's
And
interesting.
yeah,
I was gonna say in terms of like, so when you were talking about you didn't know about your options with like the low forward. Was it more about like you didn't know that you could like drive rush and then overhead, or like drive rush and then throw instead, like those kind of options, or were you talking about something else?
I mean, I definitely didn't do those enough. I was doing drive rush into throw pretty much every time because my thinking was I was doing really well in the ground game, right? And I just typically, if I could stay at a certain distance at the range at which my fireballs were safe enough and I could DP jump ins, I was doing pretty okay in matches. So a throw tech, that's going to leave me right there. So if I throw you, then I get a throw loop. If I get throw tech, then I'm back there. Problem is, it's very expensive to do that option a whole bunch of times.
Yeah.
Right. And the other thing is that I could be a little greedier too, and I could go in and I could do +2 on my jab, and I could enforce a better offensive situation for myself if I wanted to go that route. The other one is that it's okay to just go low forward and a fireball, low forward and drive impact, or low forward and do nothing. Right? Yeah. Wait for them to hit a button and do something. That's the big one. It's just giving up my turn and seeing what else someone's gonna do. I'm already in a good range, a lot of the time, and I can play that game. That's what I've been working on today, actually.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I was gonna say, yeah, as a sim player, that's something that I got into a bad habit with 5 was like, you're used to having the range advantage, right? Hitting people from 3/4 screen and stuff like that with normals. So I got in a bad habit of kind of hitting heavies at bad situations. And heavy buttons got horrible recovery. So it's like, okay, I'm in a good range. Let me throw out this standing roundhouse and hopefully I hit him in the face. And next thing I know, I'm getting jumped on. And I'm like, that was a bad spacing actually for me to do that. Like I was relying on the fact that I had range, but I wasn't thinking about the fact that, that wasn't the best kind of button to use, right? Like I was basically giving up my turn and allowing somebody to jump in versus, throwing out like a medium or a short or something faster where, like you said, like I'm giving up my turn, but at the same time, I still have the opportunity to react and to anti-air based on what you do.
Yep.
Yeah, this is a kind of a concept in 5 as well, where a lot of people would whiff heavy kick crush counter buttons, and then that would open them to jump ins because they're whiffing those buttons. And so it ended up like pulling back the meta a little bit from crush counter buttons to using jabs and forwards and neutral. And 6 kind of has that same feeling where like AJ, I don't necessarily do the numbers thing for ranges like you do, but I do think about it in terms of, am I in jab range? Am I in light range? Am I in medium range? Am I in heavy range? And then am I in fireball range?
Yeah. That's ideal.
Yeah. And I feel like, at first, like when you're learning the game, you're pretty much playing at either max range or really, really far up close. And that every action is taking yourself from far range to like fireball range to jab range, and you skip roundhouse and medium range via something like a jump or something like a drive impact. I think that those mechanics, they call them skip neutral mechanics because they're deliberately skipping 2 zones on the screen. And you don't end up playing that medium and heavy range footsies game very often. But you play the heavy range game if you want to like try to punish a fireball or something, but it's about like being more comfortable in those 2 ranges. And that's actually what I've been trying to work on a lot more lately, is walking into those 2 ranges, specifically medium and heavy range, and being willing to walk into their low forward range and basically make a statement being like, I'm walking up on your ass right now. I don't expect you to hit a medium button even though I'm in that range. And then you get into that footsies conversation. At the same time, you're trying to anti-air and you're trying to react to DI and all this other stuff. So that sounds easy, but it's really not.
Yeah, I'm almost like in such a similar spot. Yeah, I'm walking into low forward range, except I am trying to like commit to blocking. I don't know if you're like a musical instrument person, but it's like playing the rests or whatever, like actively doing like a nothing in somebody's face and choosing it to be, I'm going to take my -4 frames or whatever. Or like if it's Ryu, you walk into the low forward range, a fireball's coming, you drive impact or something, something that starts with you blocking something.
because like if you get someone, if you get in a position where like you walk forward and you block and then they stick out a low medium kick, like at first, like to a spectator, you're like, oh man, they blocked something, they must be on the defense now. But from the player's standpoint, you're like, oh man, I got that button out of him. He's scared. He wants to assert that space because he's worried I'm getting in there. It's like a really unique statement. I got a chance to play Justin Wong on ranked a couple nights ago, and he played Chun, so we played the mirror, and I got to really compare how I use my buttons and how he uses his buttons. And the guy, like, his low forward is magical, and I'm like, wait, I have the same low forward. And I didn't get it, but like they're like, I just like, he would constantly walk into my low forward range and I'd be like, oh, I'm immediately going to hit a button, and he would block it, and then after a while he knew when I was going to hit low forward and he would counter hit me instead. And it was just footsies. There you go, it's footsies. But I did want to revisit a topic that Benny mentioned in the intro, because you brought up drive impact, Benny, as an eye rolling mechanic, and I wanted to know, like, number one, like how are you faring now that the game's been out a little bit while, and have you had time to get used to it? And if not, then like what are you looking to, how are you looking to deal with it moving forward?
So I am getting better at dealing with it. I was going to speak briefly just because I find the whole notebook thing interesting, because like,
right.
I've thought about doing stuff like that, right? And I mean, I think certainly everybody kind of makes mental notes of like why they lose, right? Like if I lose and I'm like, oh man, I missed my anti-air here, right? Or oh man, I dropped my combo right here, and that was the game winner right there. And like I make mental notes of that like all the time, but I've never thought about just kind of writing it down, just to be like, okay, why am I losing this matchup? Oh, I got throw looped, 4 times in the corner because I didn't press a button, right? And for somebody that's really like kind of like a visual learner, like, or somebody that retains information, like when I read it, like I feel like that might be something helpful for me that I might start doing, because I'm older than you guys, and I come from that kind of arcade era where a lot of it's just trial and error. Like I was used to just playing games and seeing people do something, and then every situation I would try something different. I was like, okay, what happens if I hit jab here? What happens if I try my reversal here? And it's a lot of figuring out stuff on the fly, and losing a lot in the process. And I could kind of eliminate stuff like that nowadays with like Twitter and the internet and access to seeing how people deal with those situations. But to talk about like drive impact, like I think my biggest thing initially was just not reacting to it and not expecting it at a lot of situations. Because like I said, I started out in silver, and it is the wild, wild west out there at those lower ranks. Like, like I know people get into patterns, and myself included, and it's crazy. Like the kind of patterns I was seeing from people, like their block strings would be like, was it like light, medium, and then drive impact, and then I'd be like, okay, I got hit by that one, and then they reset the situation, then they do the same thing. So, if people were watching my stream, like there was a lot of games where I was losing like the first game, and it's just because I was literally downloading data at that point. I was just like, okay, this is what he likes to do. And then at that point I was just like, okay, this is what I got to look out for. And then I start reacting to it. Or with Sim, I'm able to like jump and teleport out of the way or something like that. So like I'm finding ways to deal with it like on the fly. Maybe that's not always the best situation, because at that point I'm down a game already, but that's what's been working for me.
Okay. I think that's it's kind of the equivalent of like, hey, round one or game one, taking a bunch of jump ins just to see like how, not I mean obviously blocking it if you can, but
yeah.
But like letting them jump, just kind of see like what their jumping patterns are, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and like I think the thing with playing the two different characters, right, between Honda and Sim, has been really kind of eye opening in terms of like when people choose to drive impact. Because we talked about this briefly, John, but like when I was playing Honda, like I get into the mode where I kind of like check out, and I kind of start doing kind of stupid things like full screen headbutts and stuff like that. So I was getting drive impacted by better players from from distances like that, right? Like I do like a medium headbutt, I think I'm in an okay range. The next thing I know, I'm getting drive impacted, and I'm just like, okay, he's got those, Whereas I'd play somebody lower ranked, and they wouldn't punish me for that at all. Like here I am just chipping drive meter away, and I'm just like, okay, this is how I should play. So, and then with sim, it's like it's a different thing. Like, uh, I don't know. I kind of learned that from playing sim in 5 too. It's just you really you really get to see how patient people really are, because when their life starts chipping away because they're getting kicked from the full screen away, and you start throwing fireballs into the mix, you start to get a read for like, okay, he wants to jump here, or in this game parry. Like I throw fireballs, and I see a lot of people just kind of hang back, and they're just like, oh, I'm just gonna parry.
Sure.
So there's a lot of I guess, yeah, reactionary kind of gameplay on my part, just to kind of see how people want to play against sim in particular.
Sim's an interesting character where like you have to be active because technically you have advantage at round 1 start, but you also have to play reactive because they're going to react to you having advantage and throwing a haymaker like a DI or a full screen headbutt or something, right?
Yeah.
I one thing that always gets me, and I'm curious if you guys have this similar experience, is like what I mentioned earlier, like, hey, I found a problem that I need to solve. I need to build a solution for this. Whether that's find a new BNB or try a new mix-up, try a different strategy, like walking in a low forward range or something. Do you guys ever find that makes you worse out of the gates when you're first trying the new thing? Like you lose way more when you add a new thing to your repertoire? Does that happen to you guys?
Well, yeah, I would say that, but the main reason why is because I get kind of tunnel vision into wanting to implement that into my game right away, right? So it's just like, oh, I figured out this. I can back heavy punch with Dhalsim, and then I can drive rush and get another one, and super from there, right? Like that was something that I was doing in training mode. But then like I got into games, and I was just kind of sitting there waiting for somebody to jump, and then I'd play somebody that's just doesn't want to jump at all, and I'm like, when am I going to get the opportunity to try out this new tech that I just figured out? And I'm like, I kind of get lost waiting for that situation, and end up losing as a result.
Yeah, pretty much exactly. Yeah, I lose a lot more, but I don't know if it's like worse because my understanding of the game is better. So even if it's not reflected in some random ranked match or something like that, that means basically nothing to me. And I'm just willing to soak up the losses as much as I can, to be honest. As long as I have my own metric of how I'm improving, then that's what matters to me.
Yeah,
that's actually a really good point too. Is that we frequently use wins and losses because that's the success failure state in this game, right? As a measure of progress. I've seen people measure based on life bar versus number of rounds, that kind of stuff. And how are you measuring your progress internally, AJ?
Yeah, I mean that's the hard part with all games. It's basically I take what I think causes me to win, and then I see how often I'm doing the idea of those things that are causing me to win. So okay, I'm going for throw loops as much as I can now. Maybe first day I sweep and I don't even know to go for a throw loop or something like that. Upon replay viewing, I can see, oh, I didn't go for that. I can literally tally that, and I can be like, my throw loop percentage is like 0% here off of sweep, and then that's like a concrete data point that I have that I can just look at and be like, okay, I got to improve that clearly. And then I'll reevaluate myself down the line whenever I have time to review VODs. And I look at those kind of key markers and see where I've gotten better or where I've gotten worse. Typically in like the learning stage, you're only going to get better like in this early on.
Yeah.
And then once you start like slipping and falling in certain areas and getting way better in certain ones, that's like competitive stage, and you're not learning anymore. You're like playing the game for real, and then that's a whole other can of worms.
Do you think anybody's playing the game for real right now?
Well, yeah. If you look at the people like Punk, right? He just won $10,000 or whatever from that won launch tournament, those people were playing probably to win as opposed to learn, because there's like a financial incentive there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they're going to be less playful. You're going to see a lot of rote stuff that they know works, and there's going to be a lot of less creativity and exploration.
Yeah, I think like it's real easy to kind of measure yourself based on like wins and losses and stuff, right? But like I've been losing a lot like initially, and it's frustrating, but at the same time, like I try to just look at my game as a whole, kind of like AJ said. Like even if I've learned this new conversion or something, right? It's not whether I'm able to hit it. It's okay when I get the opportunity, like how often or how consistent am I being at doing that? Because it's one thing to like, okay, I know this combo and I know how to do it, but am I able to do it in the heat of battle or when I need to do it? And that's something that I was able to do yesterday. Was like I was kept on trying this drive rush combo that I'd been practicing, and I hit it a couple times in random matches, and then I played one person where I did it twice in a round to basically like seal the round. And for me, I was just like, okay, that's finally coming together. Like this is another piece that I've added, and like, yeah, can I improve on it in terms of damage? Sure, but I was like, in those particular situations, like this is something we talked about the last week, John. It's like in this game in particular, like there's not really like a B&B that I have in mind when I'm going in, right? It's like I have certain simple things I might do, like normal and canceling the fireball. But in terms of combos, like I'm basically freestyling at the time, or just based on what the situation is, and whether I want like a knockdown or whether I can super and kill at this point. So there's not really any kind of situation where it's like, all right, this is what I'm going to do every time.
I getcha. And that I echo those sentiments. Like I definitely fall like more on AJ style as far as like the doing the spreadsheet and doing a qualitative analysis of each B&B, and then measuring the damage and the resource consumption of it. But the issue that I found, and that works for like pretty much every game I've played up until this one, because of the fact that everything has an inherent cost to it, and that costs how much cash you have in your wallet changes so rapidly because it's tied to your block gauge and stuff. And so the spreadsheet started like an ordinary game spreadsheet would probably be like a couple of like maybe like 50 rows max, right? Obviously if it's like a versus game or something where you got a big team, like it's going to change. But for 6, it's like, no, I have every B&B I have, like every starter, like for example, like a jab starter or a low forward starter, there's like 9 permutations for it. There's like, do you want to burn 1 bar on a parry rush? Do you want to burn 2 bars on an EX? Do you want to burn 3 bars on a DRC? Do you want to do that again and burn an entire gauge? How much super do you want to use? And it's like, so basically one combo turns into 9 rows on my spreadsheet, and it just gets so long to the point where I don't know if I have the mental capacity to memorize all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I've actually found that I'm doing a little bit of both, where like I'm writing down the combos that I'm doing, but I'm not writing them down to reference later. I don't actually ever read my notes. I just write them down to help like instill it in the brain, and then have that ready in my brain to freestyle, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like for me, what the way that I've kind of been building upon like the combos and stuff is just kind of learning the routes that I can do and just having those in my mind, right? So it's like if I do this, what's the next normal that I can do, or what special can I cancel to at this point? And because I always like when you were playing Street Fighter 5, like you jumped around characters towards the end of the game a lot, and I was like, how do you manage to play all these characters and at a competent level, right? And you were like, well, the routes are kind of similar once you start understanding like the basics of a character. So that's kind of been my approach now, when it comes, especially in this game with the meter management, is just like, okay, I hit them with this, and my mind already knows like, okay, I've got whatever options from this.
Yeah.
And then I kind of go from there. And again, like I mentioned earlier, like I'm not at the point to where I'm calculated enough to know, okay, I need to burn this meter now, and I burn a super and I win. But I feel like that'll come in time. But at this point, it's just like, okay, what are my options from this situation, and then how do I capitalize on it?
Yeah, I feel like every character in this game, and AJ, I shared this with you, I think this past weekend, but every character in this game has like a light party starter, and I don't mean that as in like a jab or something, but I'm saying like they have a confirm into something that's pretty low committal, and maybe not. It might not end in a knockdown. It might end in a knockdown, but and then everybody has a big party starter, and that's usually like crouch fierce or stand fierce into a big special move that allows you to juggle into some cool ass drive rush combo or something, right? And so I felt like for every character I've tried in 6 since its launch here, like every character has a way of getting into that big party starter. Like Jamie's crouch fierce opens up his rush punch and that kind of stuff. Chun, you're always just trying to go into the back fierce as much as possible. Ryu, you're trying to go into back fierce as much as possible. Luke, you're trying to go into crouch fierce into your big flash knuckle juggle. Like from there, you're like, okay, my big route is there. How do I get there? And then you start finding creative ways to do it, like drive impact, crumple state. You get a freestand crouch fierce right there, right? Or a jab DRC. You can do jab, DRC, jab, link into crouch fierce, and then suddenly the whole world is opened up to you compared to like a normal, like, light knuckle confirm or something with Luke. To the point where sometimes it feels a little overly homogenized, but that's the pattern that I've noticed. And in 5, that same pattern was present. It was just mediums instead. And in 4, the pattern was lights. So I feel like you can kind of pinpoint a theme of the game. And this 6, for the record, is the most open-ended, where it's got lights and it's got heavies as far as like your big party starter combos. So it's got a little bit of everything, and then they just attached a cost to it. So you have to decide how committal you want to be, right?
Yeah. I mean, to kind of circle back on what you were saying, though, like it gets really chunky and ugly when you start recording all the data points down, and okay, you need like a combo off of X, Y, and Z. It's all different combos, all different routes for each one of those things. But the alternative is to just let your mind do it, which is also like not ideal, so taking that hybrid approach, I think, is crucial in a game like this. And even if you aren't, even if you don't know that you're doing it, a lot of the time, just talking to your friends over IM is indirectly you taking notes and regurgitating that information. Almost tweeting angrily about, oh, I got hit by drive impact 37 times. Also note taking, right? It's kind of embarrassing to note take that way, but people do that. It seems people use Twitter as their notebooks, which is an incredible development in information. But I think that it's I think we talked about it a little bit last time, but did you take that intro to UI course at ASU, John?
I don't think that course was around when I was in school. What was it like? Was it teaching like a JavaScript framework or something?
No, it was like the ideas of UX and just general design, what makes a good design, and how to interface with like human-centered design and stuff.
Oh yeah, I took a human and computer interactions course. Maybe it was similar in that nature.
Yeah, that changed like the way I think about the world, and especially the way that I think about fighting games. Me and Varkalin, actually, we ended up meeting in that class. We both played fighting games. I hadn't really talked to him before that. We hadn't really communicated, but we became partners through that class. And like Dragon Ball Z was the new game, and they talked about, and we became homies with that guy, right? But then also the stuff that he was teaching was like so widely applicable to everything, right? Like Miller's Law. You remember Miller's Law?
No. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, that the working memory can only hold 7 things plus or minus 2. It's like that concrete. It's just that. So the more you can lessen that mental load, the higher performing you're gonna be. So just in terms of note taking, it's the same reason why writing things down and never having to look at it again is so effective in strategies, because you're able to use your working memory more in matches. As opposed to having them like constantly like, oh my god, I've got this mental stack. Oh, I got a jab. I'm gonna spend 2 bars and stuff like that. Like really granular, specific things. You're able to abstract them into more widely applicable ideas that will carry you to victory, and thus you have fewer things to look for in your mental load. Your stack becomes more compiled, and it's just a more comprehensive approach to the game that way.
So like if I understand the example, if I understand this right, an example would be, rather than memorizing jab DRC, jab back fierce into launcher, which is my combo, I would instead just think, oh, I landed a jab, I need to go into back fierce somehow.
Yes.
And then like make the logical connection that way instead.
Yeah, and then maybe you can get your other memory. I forgot what the other memory was. Isn't that kind of ironic?
Okay. Yeah, no, it's like
long-term.
I guess
that's so stupid. My long-term. I forgot the term long-term memory.
Yeah, so like one thing, like, so I'm a big Bruce Lee fan, right? And one of the big quotes that he has is in Enter the Dragon, right? When he's talking to the kid before all the crazy stuff happens in the movie. And he basically says, a good martial artist does not become tense but ready, not thinking yet not dreaming, ready for whatever may come. When the opponent expands, I contract, and when he contracts, I expand. And when there is an opportunity I do not hit, it, in quotes, hits all by itself. And that's something that I've always tried to apply to my fighting game kind of philosophy and how I play. Like, everybody wants to kind of get to that point to where you're not thinking about what do I do with this situation, right? Like, for example, like when it comes to anti-airs, like all I'm looking for in an anti-air situation is at what distance are they jumping, right? And at that point, like my mind already knows back medium works at this range, back fierce works at this range, and whether we're playing the footsie game and I'm trying to establish a certain spacing so that I know what to do. Like again, like I try to like AJ was saying, I try to simplify what I need to do in that situation. So like if I try to keep them at long distance, like I know that the only button that I need to do at that moment is the back fierce, right? And if they close that distance, then my mind is like, okay, don't do back fierce, it's too slow. They're gonna get in on you before you know it, and you're gonna get hit. So at that point, like mentally, I'm already like limiting my options. Like I see, I'm assessing the situation and I'm saying, hey, what's the spacing here? What do I need to do in the situation? If they jump, can I slide under it? Can I teleport away from it? And it's like you kind of do that almost unnaturally in a way. And like I try, like like he was saying, like I try not to overwhelm myself in terms of like knowing what all my options are at that time, right? It's like
right.
I'm not thinking about everything at one time. It's like let me funnel it down to like what the particular situation is and spacing and whatever, and then that way I just inherently know what to do at that point.
I think that's a really common pitfall that people fall into, is that they get under the impression that everything is reactable. Because everything has an answer, therefore you should be ready to have that answer at all times. And that's when the mental stack rebuttal happens, right? And it's like, well, you can only count on so many things. And I think it gets, the point that you made there, Benny, is really strong, in that it's less so about trying to react to everything everywhere all at once, but instead contextualizing the possible options based on the situation and saying, I don't have to worry about a fireball at range 0 when we're point blank. I might have to worry about a jump, but even then, who jumps at that range? So I might just remove that from my mental stack at the time. And if they jump and they surprise the shit out of me, that sucks. But at the end of the day, you have to commit to your mental stack almost. And you have to choose to be ready for X, Y, and Z. And when in reality, you can only pick 2 out of the 3. So you have to just pick 2 out of those 3. And if they pick the third one, you lost the exchange. You can't be ready for everything. A good example of this is in Street Fighter V. I was so dead set on like checking dashes all the time, and dashes were extremely difficult to react to in this game. And the parallel here is Drive Rush, because right now I think everyone's complaining about Drive Rush. and how it's not reactable and stuff like that. You can actually react to it if you're like sitting there watching it very, very carefully. And there are times when you want to do that. There are times when you're like, I'm willing to take the jump in. I'm willing to let them jump. I'll obviously block on reaction still, but I won't be able to anti-air. I'm like willingly giving up my anti-air off my mental stack because I have this really strong read from the player-to-player interaction that they're going to drive rush at me. And so I'm going to stick a button out. And that might also cover them advancing. That might be a whiff punish as well. So it covers multiple options. But at the end of the day, you are committing to a specific, like you have a set size on your mental stack and you're just committing to those options. And anything above that, you just got to let it go. AJ, in the chat here, we've had conversations about mental stack and muscle memory, and I was curious about like what is your definition of muscle memory for the group here?
Yeah, muscle memory. I don't have like an exact one. I've been trying to like read about exactly what it is, but it's almost like a mystical thing. It's almost like instinct. You know, you just get it programmed into you to the point where you can unconsciously perform this action. And it's just like a part of who you are now. You know, somebody can mention fireball motion and without thinking, you just do that, right? And then it's just, it's completely unconscious. You don't even have to pay attention to it, really. That's the kind of level where it's like, okay, I know like where my buttons are and stuff like that. Or, okay, like tap forward to move. Like you would never think about that in a match generally, right? Unless it's like, unless you notice it and it's like you're using a new controller or something like that. That's where you like really know that you got to get the muscle memory down and stuff from there. But yeah, that's generally how I look at muscle memory. It's something separate from long-term or short-term memory.
Yeah, I was gonna say like, yeah, you know that point I was making about the, you know, it doesn't hit, you know, it hits it hits all by itself, right? Like to me, that's not muscle memory. That's like more like instinct, right? For me, like, I guess I think of muscle memory as like like knowing the combos and like doing those without any kind of any thought, like in that sense. Like that's not really the same thing to me. Like the instinct part is really just kind of like the situational awareness almost in a sense, and knowing what to do in certain situations. Whereas to me, like muscle memory is like, okay, I got the opening, here's the jump in, do this combos into this, super, right? That to me is muscle memory.
Yeah. I'm at the point nowadays where the combo is less about what combo I do and more about what situation do I want to create after the combo's done. And so I think that I think that you guys can probably relate to this, but like while you're doing a combo, you're not thinking about like, barring it being a really heavy execution combo where you do have to focus on it. I'm not usually thinking about the combo while I'm doing it. I'm thinking about everything that's going to happen after or everything that led up to it, including like, how did I land this combo? Is it because they jumped? Oh, I need to mark that as like a player-to-player interaction for later to use against them. You know, maybe they won't jump anymore because I'm doing this combo to them. Or like, hey, last time they got hit by this combo that I'm currently doing, they blocked high. Maybe I go low this time, or maybe I go for a throw this time. And you're busy parsing the rest of the match while you're doing the combo. And I think that I would maybe call that muscle memory, but it's kind of that it's more akin to your quote there, Benny, where the combo lands itself. You're essentially taking the combo out of, like, you're externalizing the combo and putting it out there, and that thing is happening, but you can't lose concentration while the combo is happening, and you're thinking about something completely different. Like a situational awareness thing.
Yeah, in instances where I am thinking about the combo, almost invariably, that's when I drop the combo. That's what happens.
Yep.
It happens. Yeah. You do think about the combo, and then it's not gonna go through.
And sometimes it's like there's like outside external factors. Like it's like Nam was the person who asked about muscle memory in the chat, right? And so I think of faultine loops when I think of Nam, right? And those have a reputation for being hard, but also being the centerpiece of the Nova team, right? And so, like, you almost have to think about that combo because it's so relevant to the metagame in a way. And so
you can't. You have to be thinking about the incoming that you're gonna do on the next character or something else. That's the trap. You can't be thinking about it.
Right.
You can't.
Like the worst thing you can do, and I've done this with lightning loops in Marvel, is think about what happens if I don't land this lightning loop, I'm fucked. Yeah. That is the absolute worst thing that you could burn your mental space on, is like, what happens if I drop this? I'm so scared of dropping it.
Yeah, that's what happens. That's what happens when too much thought gets paid into the actual combo.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, well, speaking of the mental stack, I was looking back at the chat, and then from is it Star Priestess Shika?
Yes.
They asked, does the way that you all practice involve anything to deal with mental stack, or is that just something you see as a parallel to everything else?
I'm trying, like, my mental stack is overloaded right now trying to answer that question.
Oh, we got a mental stack overflow.
But I actually think that that kind of ties back to your previous answer, Benny, about the blinders, like, where it's like, rather than trying to get overwhelmed by everything everywhere all at once and trying to widen this mental stack, it's more about accepting the little mental stack that you have and then just focusing on those small options and then slowly adding things in and being like, right now I care only about anti-airs and countering drive impact. I care about those two things. They're gonna walk in on me and I'm just gonna take it. And then over time, you're like, okay, the drive impact's becoming a little bit more natural. The anti-airs becoming a little bit more natural. I'm gonna add a button in to keep them from walking forward and drive rushing on me.
Yeah.
So it's incremental. I think I would call it that.
Yeah, it's like I said, like, I mean, when it came to starting this game, I overwhelmed myself in terms of like learning offensive stuff and then also trying to deal with the defensive stuff, and there was just way too much going on. And so for me, like I don't have any practice that involves dealing with the mental stack. It's more just kind of like, I know some people that, they've been practicing like reacting to drive rush or practicing reacting to drive impact. And like, I haven't done any like practice involving that. It's just more, again, just refining like what I'm focusing on in the situation. And like you said, like there's certain things where you gotta just check it off and leave it out of your mental stack at that situation, right? Like, oh well, at this point, I'm gonna focus on anti-airs because they've been jumping a lot, and if they drive rush in, then I'm just probably gonna eat that.
Yep. In the training mode for 6, there's actually a drive impact practice mode, and like we all it'll basically like Ryu will jump and then he'll do a drive impact, right? And you react to that, and then to the average player, I think you're like, well, that's in a vacuum. It's in a training mode setting. Like, I'm watching for it, of course, right? But if you peel back that mode a little bit, it actually adds like 5 or 6 more recordings that are disabled by default, and it adds. It makes Ryu jump, it makes Ryu dash forward, it makes Ryu drive rush forward, and it adds more to that mental stack. So it's almost like Capcom knew that, and they're like, okay, so we want to get you to go okay with drive impact, and then as you get more comfortable with that in the vacuum, start turning these options on and start making Ryu do these other things and see if you can still deal with it.
I didn't even have an idea that was in there. Like, I mean, I went into like the standard training mode and messed around in there. I hadn't gone into like any of like that anti-air stuff or anything like that.
Drive impact practice is pretty awesome.
Yeah, like I was actually telling I was playing with one of my friends in Alaska yesterday, and I was telling him how I found it out on stream. It's probably my VOD somewhere, but I like this whole time I've been playing like I was playing YouTube John, and I was just like, man, these fireball wars are tough with Sim, and I realized on stream that I was missing a command normal. Like, his down forward fierce is the one where he does like the flat ground and goes underneath. And all I've been doing before that was just crouch fierce, and that's just the standard fierce, and that's the one that gets hit by the fireballs, and like you see both of his arms at the same time. And this whole time I was just like, man, why doesn't he have that move anymore? And it's just like I hadn't explored that all of my buttons and all of my move set. Like, I just assumed like, oh, I guess he just doesn't have it. And then I was in the middle of a match, and I guess I pressed down forward and I did it, and I was just like, holy shit, he still has his move. Like, I've been losing fireball wars, and this whole time, like, I've been not even utilizing like one of my best tools for that.
Yeah, a quick remark on the drive impact. Also, when I'm watching games, I act like I'm hitting the button whenever I see it happen in the game. or I hear it happen, just to get that instinctually in me. Like I want to be walking down the street, and if I hear the sound effect, I just.
I got the triggers. I'm gonna have to put that like my phone notification or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you're walking down the street, and then a drive impact jumps out of the alleyway, and it's like, fuck you.
It's just like
I hit it second.
It's like World Tour mode all over again. One of the concepts that I hear pretty regularly at work is the concept of flow. So at least in the coding standpoint, right? Like you hit this point where you're just cranking out code. You're writing things really quickly, and oftentimes it's tied with no interruptions and people not letting you people not knocking on your door, and and it usually takes like a couple of, for me at least, it takes like a good hour or something before I really enter that flow state. And for a long time I never thought to connect that to fighting games. But I saw somebody, one of my training partners from 5 actually brought that forward and was like, so for flow, like I want to get to a point where, kind of like the Bruce Lee quote earlier, I want to just react to things and not have to think about it and enter that flow state. And it took me a little while to think about what flow meant in Street Fighter V. And then it got me thinking about what flow meant in Street Fighter 4, as well as what it means in 6. And in 5, the funny thing is that I think flow is what everybody complains about. When your opponent is in flow, they're just doing shit, and then they're like you ever see somebody do like a button dash backwards, and then you get baited into hitting a button because you see the dash, and then they immediately hit you out of it because they've already committed to doing it. They just dash back and they hit you. Like they've already committed like 5 steps in advance. And I used to think that was the scrubbiest shit ever, because I'm just like, this guy's just flow charting, blah 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 blah. But in reality, this guy, it's in the word flow chart. It's flow. And in 5, it's medium pressure, and in 4, it's vortex pressure. And what's interesting I found about 6 is that flow exists. Like you can do that stuff again, but more like Street Fighter 4. Or more like jab pressure or something like that. But this game seems deliberately designed to pull you out of flow constantly. Whether that's via the drive gauge and giving you visual feedback that you burned too much and you just got burnt out, eat shit. Or like your opponent doing something like a drive impact or a drive rush or a jump or a normal dash, even. Just having all these other different things to disrupt your flow. And I think that's actually what is causing a lot of angst currently, because I get like, it's funny because we came up with this show idea like last week, I think, and just like I think in the past 2 days, the Twitter topic of the day is like, I'm frustrated at Street Fighter 6, I'm not getting better and stuff like that. And a lot of the criticisms I see are around people entering flow state and being forcibly knocked out of it, and they don't like that.
I could talk for a long time on flow state, but like, because that's like the secret sauce. If you can get to flow state, that's like why athletes win championships. That's like the secret to like peak human performance is somehow entering flow state and having it optimized for you. Ideally, it's not going to be something like a flow chart, as you're saying. It's like you're unconscious, or so you could look at it as a different in a different perspective, that the linguistics part of your brain is just a slower part of your brain than what the rest of it is. So when you hear yourself talking about a situation, it's always going to be a little bit slower, easier to overwhelm, as opposed to being able to get into flow state, and it's just like almost your instincts taking over. It's almost like you black out and you get to play in that mode for a while, and your body makes all of the decisions for you, but it's all completely reactive. If you listen to like sports players, but even some like a player like Punk, he just like, I just react. That's how he does it. Being able to optimize and consistently put yourself in the zone. That's like the next step. That's what alleviating the mental stack will eventually lead you to do, to kind of touch upon the mental stack discourse that we were having earlier. a lot of it is that everyone's complaining about mental stack from the day one, right? No one has it compiled yet. As a CS person, I know that you got to compile the stack. Eventually it's got to get squished down, and it's got to become a part of your underlying like being. That's just the way you think about things now is going to be manifested in flow state. That's or vice versa. Just other life experiences will come up, and that's how you'll apply that to video games or whatever you're doing. That's the stuff you can get in flow.
Like you mentioned sports, and then like being in the zone. Like that's a term commonly used in basketball, right? Yeah. Like when you're just like whatever you throw up, right? Like it's just it's going in the basket. It doesn't matter, right? And then all of our talk about mental stack and like reducing that or limiting that, it just made me think about like when it comes to basketball, right? It's 5-on-5, and a lot of teams don't run plays, right? But then like when it comes down to it, and it's like the game's on the line, what do a lot of teams do? They give it to their best player, and they run what they call an isolation play. It's a 1-on-1. So in that situation, like you're not dealing with the other 4 players on the defense, right? They're all spread out. It's mano a mano, you versus this guy, and you're doing whatever you've learned up to that point to get a single shot off, right? And that's a perfect parallel to reducing your mental stack, because at that point you're not worrying about everybody else. It's you versus this guy. Let me do whatever I've learned instinctually, muscle memory, my best move to get an open shot. And you live with the results at that point.
Yeah, it's where the coolest plays tend to happen too. People like completely create stuff out of thin air in those moments because the rest of their mental stack is alleviated. You want to even further expand on that. That's just not everything that they do. Obviously, the coach has a playbook. That's our notes, right? That's what they have to alleviate everyone else's mental stack. No one else has to keep track of it. The coach has it. The coach has all of these different situations and scenarios that he can throw out the team, be like, hey, do X, Y, and Z. Boom. The player didn't even have to think about it. The coach has it all in a book. He doesn't really have to think about it too hard either. He can pull it directly out of a book. And then it's just hours and hours, tens of thousands of hours of drills and practice just get to be put into motion right there.
Yeah.
And it's just your creativity, getting to bend what you know before.
Yep. And the creativity of Six's combo system, or like the open-endedness of Six's combo system, I think will result in a lot of situations where we don't do the optimal thing, but we do the thing that's best in service of the flow. I actually, that's what I think is one of the more magical things about DRC, not Drive Rush, but Drive Rush cancels in particular, in that there's always going to be a more optimal solution for besides Drive Rush because of how expensive that is, how you get a penalty on recovery and stuff like that. But it is so intuitive and easy in air quotes, because I know the dashing is kind of hard, but like it's easy to convert every poke or every like stray button into a DRC combo. And so I find myself deliberately not like I find myself like for example with Sean, I have an overhead, right? I can combo after the overhead, but I can like really focus really hard and hit confirm it, or I can just DRC it and know that because I know it's going to hit, and I'm in that flow state by then. I'm already in my flow chart of like trying to do the high-low mix-up and stuff like that. And I deliberately burn more resources to keep that flow state intact. And that's like a really... it's gotten me killed a couple times, to be candid. But other times it's like your opponent is also witnessing that flow state, and they have to react to everything that you are just like throwing at them and inherently reacting to them. So it's like you're adding to their mental stack by being in flow state, so to speak. To pivot a little bit here, because we mentioned we've gotten into a lot of like philosophies and a lot of like reactions and mental stat conversation, but going back to like improvement, I was curious about the impact or the effect that online rankings have had on gauging progression. We mentioned the kind of like the micro goals from earlier, where it's like, there's a new combo that I wanted to try that won me the game, and that was a measure of progress. Or, hey, I may have lost the round, but at least I knew to stand at this range and I lost at this range overusing it, you know. There's a lot of conversations on Twitter and just in general about like with placement matches and the concept of them and what leagues people are being placed in. And I was curious about how you guys felt about online rankings, like particularly like master, diamonds, platinum, gold, silver, iron. Like, are those representative of progress? Are those a good gauge of progress as you're getting better and learning the game? AJ, would you like to start?
Yeah, I could start on that. Online ranking ideally shouldn't matter too much, right? But if that is your consistent source of games, then it will be accurate, right? If you're stuck in bronze and you're playing thousands of hours of Street Fighter, then you're a bronze player, right? That's like a pretty useful metric for something like that.
Yeah.
But it goes a little bit deeper now that we're talking about. I touched on it like very briefly at the very beginning, talking about Street Fighter League and stuff and the esports thing. In League of Legends, in order to get picked up by like a big team or something, you need to climb up the solo queue ladder ranking, right? And then that's how scouts find you and then put you on a team. The way that Street Fighter 6 is going might actually go in that kind of direction. This is the first time I've seen it where they have like a certain set amount of teams that are all sponsored and they buy their spots, and thus they want some kind of metric to say, hey, I can invest in this player because they were rank X on Street Fighter 6 or League of Legends or whatever. Mm-hmm. You know, so that's kind of the weird thing about online ranking. It tells you a general idea of where you may fit, but you can't, if your goal should generally be to do well in tournament, right? If you're taking the traditional FGC route, but it might change soon. It might change. Maybe there is merit in getting as high as you can in rank in Street Fighter 6.
Because of the business interests involved. Interesting.
Yeah.
Like for me personally, man. Like, you know, I don't plan to necessarily compete offline in tournaments and stuff like that. And so for me, like the online ranking, that's pretty much like my only gauge of like progress in terms of you know, against everybody else, right? So like for me, like I started out in silver, like I said, with Sim, and my initial goal right now is to get the platinum, which I did yesterday. And there's what do they call it, demotion protection or whatever, up to a certain level, and that stops at platinum from what I noticed, I think. So once you get the platinum at the 13,000 point level, like you can go back into gold 5 from there if you lose enough, because I did that myself. So
oh no,
so you can go back into gold 5. So like AJ was saying, like if I spend the next 3 weeks playing and I don't progress to like platinum 3 and I'm stuck in platinum 1 and gold 5, then for me, like I understand that that's kind of my place at this point, right? Until I get better. So because the game's literally gonna kick me back. At the lower ranks, like you gain a ton of points and there's really no, like you can gain points even if you lose, right? So you're steadily progressing regardless. But once you kind of hit that point to where demotion is possible, then I feel it's a lot more important, because at this point, like, yeah, if I lose enough, I'm just going to be, I'll be at max a gold 5 player. Whereas now I have to continually progress and win to keep moving up.
I kind of realized that I didn't like exactly nail the point either. It like a lot of it is how important do you think ranked is as results, right? And it's almost like studying from a test that you're taking constantly. You can do that, but generally the fastest way to improve is through studying like elsewhere, notably Ending Walker, who did very well at Capcom Cup in the finals recently. He said he never touched rank, and then that's how he got super duper good. He grinded with his friend the matchups constantly, so he got really good at the matchups and the understandings of the game, as opposed to a little bit of an ego boost, a little bit of a pat on the back that you did well on ranked or something like that. That just short sets aren't going to be super good at contributing to your improvement as a player. Yeah. But it's a good gauge if you're like at that level, at our level, we're not the top tippy top.
Yeah. And the other thing, like you mentioned about the kind of the business opportunities, right? When it comes to playing rank too, like, that's a very quantitative way to rank somebody and to, see their skill level. But you also got to think about online tourneys are going to be more prevalent now.
Yep.
And there's going to be certain gatekeeping in that sense, right? It's like, oh, gold and under or platinum and above, master ranks only. So, in that sense, like there's a little bit of importance in that for some people if you want to get if there's going to be tournaments like that where people are looking for the strongest players. Are you a master ranked Dawson player? Okay, then you can enter my tournament.
Yeah.
Oh, you're still sitting in platinum? Nah, like we're not gonna, you're kind of wasting our time right now. So, level up and then, come talk to me later.
Yeah, that's the next stage in this evolution. This is how we know that we've gotten there is when you start seeing less and less open brackets and you start seeing that it's more invitational. And at that point, rank might actually matter quite a bit, As you know, it doesn't make a lot of money. It doesn't make a lot of money to just host these open brackets online and stuff. And typically people really mostly pay attention to the top eights in terms of CPM and attention and stuff. So why not just skip out all the beginning of it and just go to invitationals?
And then like having qualifiers or something instead to qualify into those invitationals.
Yeah, possibly. Or if you're League of Legends, it's online rank.
Okay.
Or other games do that too, I believe.
It is a conversation that's happening a lot right now where like the fighting game community, at least from my experience, it's always felt like ranked hasn't mattered. Like I remember in Street Fighter 4, like it was a really convoluted like letter grade system, and it was like there's a PP and there's a BP and there was a CP. I don't know. It was a CP. I don't know. Either way, there's like all these different point values, and and then like 5 set it to just like a number that goes up and down, and then that also didn't work out well because it turned into like, here's how much time you put into the game. That's the other side of it, is like the rank oftentimes is less so a function of skill and more so of how much time you put in. But then you have to balance that with like, the standard human experience of being like, if I'm playing the video game, I want to see improvement. If I'm playing World of Warcraft and I'm sinking these amount of hours into it, I want to have the cool equipment, or I want to unlock all these achievements, right? Like there's a certain amount of time investment that there's a certain amount of results that people expect for their time investment, with skill notwithstanding. And I think that right now, at least with the ecosystem for 6, it is currently too time investment heavy compared to like a League of Legends, I think, where I'll just put it out there. I think that everybody can get master, or at the very least can get diamond, if they just sink enough time into the game. And you can get, I think you could even get by like gimmicks all the way up to master if you wanted to. I say that as somebody that has played people in master that play with gimmicks. And again, it's a new game, so like maybe that's not actually a gimmick and maybe I'm reading it wrong, but like 5 was the same way. I think 4 was the same way too, where like fighting game matchmaking, like again, you're catering to two different crowds of people. You want to reward the people that really want an accurate measure of skill, but then you also have like people that are just kind of grinding at home and want to see that progress, and the game will spoon feed that to them, so to speak.
It's really funny you're talking about that, because I heard almost the exact same thing from like a League of Legends player that I was talking to, who was like trying to make it big. Uh-huh. They basically, their argument is that anybody can make it to challenger, right? As long as they put enough time into the game. But the ranking you have within challenger is what matters in that game to the company at that point. Just to, I guess, thread the needle there. Okay.
And I guess like the parallels to that would be like what your tournament placings are in Street Fighter 6. But even that's like tournament placings are based on brackets and based on matchups and based on region. Like I'm not going to place in Japan because I'm not playing any of those tournaments, but maybe I could hang there. No,
right. And then it gets a little, you can see a scenario where someone is the top ranked, Dalsim online, and then they go out to a local. maybe that affects their seed a little bit. Maybe you do put, make them a higher seed because you know that kind of knowledge. So it already might affect that kind of thing.
Yeah. There's a lot of like other, like I think we've all heard that kind of Cinderella story of like, this online player coming to offline and then either doing really well and surprising people or like not doing well, and everyone's like, well, that's just because you're an online warrior, and we kind of have those two extremes. And I think right now, because of the way online is being more accepted by the fighting game community due to the advent of rollback netcode and due to the pandemic and whatnot, I think we're going to try to find like a middle ground between those two and be like, we respect online enough, but at the same time, we know that it's not the complete picture.
Versus... Yeah, that's a lot of us being a weird case though, because again, like if for League of Legends, they're focused on ranked if you are trying to be on the come up, whereas we still have these open bracket tournaments, thankfully, that these TOs pretty much just run out of goodwill. So yep. that ends up being like a really, really useful measure of skill.
I've been thinking about that too lately though, like where if you are the best in your local scene and you get clobbered out of state, isn't that kind of analogous to the online warrior in a lot of ways? Like what if you just got really good at playing against this small pool of players locally? And I frankly, I can think of some examples in our local scene.
It just depends on like, because then you start going, because this is Capcom, right? Sometimes they'll assign a certain amount of points, their own ranking system, and then that's ultimately what governs everything. If your local is Wednesday night fights and you're winning every Wednesday night fights, you're probably pretty good, right? That's odds are. But if you're at an unranked local, then it's just as much as any unranked online tournament or anything else you do that's completely unranked.
So would you like the game I'm thinking about in the past where online like mattered the least was Marvel vs. Capcom 3 because of how atrocious that netcode was. And I guess AJ, you're still plugged into the Marvel scene, like with the advent of Parsec and whatnot, like has online ranking or online play like become like more ubiquitous in even legacy games now?
Okay, so that's a whole can of worms. That is a whole thing. But let just the premise of the thing that the online didn't matter in the game. So to take a step back, there was no like ranking system. There's no Capcom Cup for Marvel or anything like that. So there was never really any way to tell who was like the objective best at the time or who had the highest amount of Marvel points or something, right? That said, the people who performed very, very well online almost always performed very well offline as well. Like if they were legitimately up there, then you're talking about players like Cloud805, like Terry Bogard, like Ryan LV, who ended up winning Evo, Quackbot, who got third at Evo. Those players all came up online. In the Parsec era, it is a whole thing. Parsec era versus the OGs. That's the current story right now. And the OGs, if you ask them, they'll be like, yeah, it completely doesn't matter. These guys suck. Meanwhile, at the last major, Liberal Terminator, this Zoomer who came up completely through the Parsec era, won the whole thing.
Yeah. We talked to Mom about
17 years old. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, well, I was gonna one thing I wanted to ask AJ something in terms of like improvement. That's what we've been talking about too. So for me personally, like when I'm playing a game, right, like I don't want to play necessarily somebody lower level that I'm going to beat 50 times in a row, right, and develop bad habits with. Like two of my biggest training partners have been John and Old Man River Jeff, and I lose to them consistently, like pretty badly. But I find myself learning and being better prepared for other situations from playing them, right? So like for instance, like I played Jeff, I think over one day, like two different sessions, and I think overall I ended up like maybe 10, 15 out of like 60. Then I played John, and John watched me like 0 out of 25 or something like that. And there's certainly situations where I was completely overwhelmed, and I was just like, okay, well, I don't know what to do in these situations, and I've got a lot of learning to do. But then there's other situations where I'm like, I'm learning like where my bad habits are. Like, this is a bad place to throw a normal. This is a bad place to throw a fireball. Those kind of things. So I was curious in terms of like your kind of training regimen. Like, do you seek out those kind of players that are, significantly better than you, or that are going to really test you? Are you looking for people that are like similarly skilled, so that there's a little bit of back and forth, or like what are you looking for?
Yeah, if I can control it, I would rather play against people who like beat me really badly, and then because then you're balancing a couple things. Usually, you only need like a first to 5. Hey, can I get a first to 5? Hey, can I get a first to 10 with you? They'll usually say yes or something like that, right? And then you get some. I'll always record those VODs. I'll always like study those VODs the most, because those ones usually give you the most data, and very painfully, a lot of the times it'll be you just lost the same way like 10 times in a row, and then you'll be, oh my god, I wasted the whole set on that or whatever. But it's unfortunate for me, I guess you could say. All my friends are just way better at Street Fighter than me, so I just ask them and I get my butt beat for as long as I want.
I kind of feel that way at even at the master rank level right now, where it's like when I play ranked, and I did this last night, I actually streamed for the first time ever. It was a lot of fun. Check out the VODs. But it's cotton candy. Like I think I had a 70. This is a humble brag, hella humble brag. I had a 76% win rate last night, and
nice.
But I actually found that I was getting worse in a lot of ways. Like, what would happen is I would go and get matched up with randoms, for lack of a better phrase, and then I would just run into like a top player, and they would maul me because I would apply the same logic to that the random player. And it was Forward Sean who one time he told me, he was like, I want to go, like he and I were playing a long set in Guilty Gear Strive, and then he just started kicking my ass after like 3 games. Like at first I had my gimmicks, I threw them at him, it worked a couple times, and then it was like 10-3 or some shit. And after a while he was like, I want to go lose. he just said, like, I want to stop playing because I want to go lose. And I think the reality is you learn more from losing than you do from winning, but losing sucks, and losing can hurt the ego. Losing can make you feel like the progress isn't there. Like, we talked a lot about gauging progress, and even where I'm at right now, like I feel like if I'm eating cotton candy on ranked, I could be spending time getting my ass beaten to first to 10 by a pro player. And like AJ said, it's about like finding the things that you did wrong, and you don't necessarily need to pay them for lessons or anything, because you don't need the lesson served to you on a silver platter, unless you learn that way, of course. But one thing I try to do is I try to take one big point from every match. Not necessarily like, hey, I need to break down every micro interaction and be like, oh, I should have done this better, I should have threw paper when I threw rock, or all that other stuff, right? But more like, why did I lose? Here's a thesis statement for this match, this round. And then I'm finding, as I've climbed these ladders and started playing higher level players, like the top players, like, it's not just one thing per game, it's one thing for the entire set, because they will find something and kill me for it over and over and over again, and I won't see it, and that is the difference between us. So like in casuals with locals or whatever, I could easily pinpoint why I lose a round, and that's really easy. But then like the higher it gets and the more amorphous it gets and the longer the set gets, it's more like, hey, you were anxious. It ties back to an emotion, if anything. It becomes more ephemeral, and it's like, oh, you were too tunnel visioned on trying to kill them before a certain amount of time, or like you did this with your meter over and over and over again. Like it's more like trends than it is like a full on, like, here's a game engine thing that I did wrong, and I could have comboed, I could have done a different combo and labbed it out differently. It ends up being like a mindset and a mental, like, emotional thing. And that's like the latest thing that I've been dealing with, which is like, how do I check those emotions? How do I curb the ego? How do I keep myself from tunnel visioning based on like perceived limitations of my character. Like right now I'm all up on Chun-Li not having a throw loop, right? Because that's what's popular on Twitter. There's a tier list that says Chun-Li's in C tier because she doesn't have a throw loop. And now that's in my head, and I'm thinking about that shit when I'm throwing somebody in the corner, and I'm like, I don't have a throw loop. This sucks, and I get anxious because I'm like, I got to make up for this somehow. And the top players are reading that and then punishing me for it, and it's a 76% win rate isn't gonna help ice those wounds. I don't think.
Yeah. No, it's funny you mentioned forward, beating you consistently and then saying that I want to go lose because after you watched me 0-25, I got out of the lobby and I was like, I want to go win, and I immediately jumped into ranked.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you gotta have that cotton handy, man. If you're eating shit and then you're like, I need to eat something sweet now, like a mint or a cotton candy.
Yeah. But a lot of that kind of boils down to your own, how you can process your own feedback of the game, because eventually the wins and losses don't matter. Actually, to thread the needle even more on this, I also played Sean in First to X in Guilty Gear Strive, but I don't remember how I did in terms of wins and losses. I remember that it went pretty back and forth, and that it was definitely like a competitive set and stuff, but other than that, I just remember why I lost the rounds that I lost more than anything else, right? I was getting air to air and I had no idea what to do about it. And there was a certainty that you did the Beyblade. I didn't know what I was supposed to do, right? That was
sure.
That's why I lost that, the rounds that I lost. Notably, I did win quite a few games in that one when I was going super hard in Strive. But
nice.
Yeah, it's all about you bring up a whole bunch of kind of separate points. Even in the beginning, you said, okay, so you don't even necessarily have to pay somebody for this kind of thing, but the thing that you're paying for is lessons. That's something we're getting on, and which is like an extension of coaching, and that's the answer basically to all the things that you're asking about and stuff like that. How can I know how I'm losing in this situation? How can I manage my emotions and stuff like that? That's you can either be your own coach or you can get someone else that you trust and put two heads together and figure out how to increase your consistency and how to improve in these situations where you're really lost. Or you can take the approach where you do start looking at these micro interactions, as I believe that you worded it. Just look at a whole bunch of them and eventually the answer should kind of pop out. But that if you don't know where to look, you don't have a coach, you don't have anything like that, I'd say probably do start with the micro interactions, and eventually some more important trends will come out later. And then you'll get to the good stuff like, oh, I was sad that day, or I didn't take a shower at 5 p.m. and it really threw me off, that kind of thing.
Yeah. What's funny about all that is like that the emotion stuff, the conclusion I came to from my sets last night, those came from a coach. One of my friends who's a fellow Chun-Li player, shout out to Kiko Master. He was tuned into my stream and he noticed all these things, and he kind of said that to me. He's like, you're playing with emotion and angst. And it's kind of a why not both scenario, because then I took that feedback and, I had my own ego I had to suspend in that process. I'm like, I'm not emotional, blah. But then I was like, let me check the VODs. And he was absolutely right. And so you're doing both. I'm checking the micro interactions to validate the coach, and then taking the coach's feedback and moving forward. So like, if it's possible, I would recommend streaming to anybody, not necessarily because you want to perform and you want people to watch you and all this other shit, but just so that way you can record your matches and you have a reason to go back and watch them later.
And there's so many people who do the Metafy thing for free. Some people will review your VODs for free, and then that gives everybody a chance to improve. Maybe a coach wants to get better. I see the coach as a pretty important role going forward in esports. In Melee, they've already like kind of fully endorsed it and everything, but in Street Fighter, it's always been a little bit nebulous, and in fighting games in general, it's always been a little bit nebulous, maybe even looked down upon to have coaching. Yeah. But I think going forward, it'll be important. So give some coaches some reps too.
Yeah, I mean that's something we talked about a long time ago with Rick, because Rick has been somebody in the community that Rick Dog that a lot of people would say it's been a great coach for them in situations like when they needed it. Like I myself had had him coach me in a couple matches, and yeah, it's just one of those things. Like I could see that being important going forward because, like you said, it has been looked down upon, right? If you lose in the middle of a tournament, and then somebody walks up to you and they're like, "Hey, no coaching, no coaching," right? But nowadays, it's just like, okay, yeah, you guys can have a coach, but it's in between games and you got like 1 minute, almost like, like boxing or UFC. You get a 1 minute, let him talk to you, have your little pep talk, stop letting him get away with this. Okay, now let's get back to the game.
Yep.
Yeah,
And,
boxing and UFC, they got a coach. You're gonna have a coach.
Yeah, and I think it is super important because a lot of times, just like John said, like he may not have noticed himself playing with emotion and angst, but somebody on the outside was just like, "Hey, this is what's going on right now, and this is why you're losing." Oh, okay. There's somebody, externally, somebody from the outside that's looking and seeing something that you're not.
I think that's a really important point too, is that it's really easy to be like, for Metafy, for example, right? You want to pick the absolute best player possible on there and the highest rank and whatnot. And sometimes, like, rather, let me just cut to the chase. Skill level and coaching ability are related, but not correlation is not causation there. Like your coach doesn't have to be a better player than you. They just have to know how you play and then recognize your habits, and they just have to know you. And so like, I found that some of the coaches that I have are they don't even play the game that I play. But they know me. They know me well. They know when I'm angsty or anxious or whatever, because they know John as a person. And that's, I don't know, like, don't disqualify people based on skill level. Just like focus on finding somebody that meshes with you and is able to give you feedback that resonates with you in your learning style.
Yeah, exactly. Because like I was at the dinner with a friend yesterday, and she works at like a dental school, and like they're looking for instructors, and she's like, it's not necessarily, we don't want the person that, the smartest person, like that's not necessarily the best teacher. We need somebody that's going to be able to convey these ideas and pass them on to somebody else. And that's something from even my high school days, is like one of my favorite teachers. Like I loved him. I learned chemistry perfectly fine from him, but there was a bunch of people in our class that just didn't resonate with him at all. So I took it upon myself to be like, okay, well, if I can convey these ideas to you, then you'll understand. And like I helped a lot of people kind of pass through high school. Like they told me that when it was graduation time, like, oh, I don't know if I would have got through this without you. And again, like I'm not a chemistry, I don't have a chemistry degree, nothing like that, but the stuff that I was learning, I was able to pass that on and to get people to understand it.
It's true. Yeah, for my money, like the best coach that I ever had was actually just my partner Jenny. She just, because obviously you kind of hear the way that I approach games and stuff. I've got a bunch of data points just floating around, and I got notepads and stuff like that. So maybe that's not the areas that I usually need help with. Maybe I just need like emotionally in check to check myself and stuff, especially when my mentality was like super duper bad. In some other games, just to be, just have someone there to like pat you on the back, like it's gonna be okay. That goes a long way too.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think that's where to tie it back to the general theme of our podcast for the past 44 episodes, that's where your local community, I think, comes in handy because we all tend to be pretty supportive of each other.
There's rivalries in there.
Rivalries too, but rivalries are another form of support.
Yeah,
but you get what I mean.
Yeah. Like I mean, like I said, I played one of my friends in Alaska yesterday. Like I just happened to be up late, and I was just like, let me jump on in their Discord and whatever. And they were, he was like, oh, I'll play you in a set, and without even like thinking about it, like we hadn't played each other in this game at all, and he would just be like, I would be pressing buttons at when he'd drive rush, and he'd be like, that's plus. And it's not anything that I didn't ask for it, but at the same time, like I was really happy to kind of have that, because it was just like he's been one of my good rivals, banksters, and we've always kind of gone back and forth in the games we've played. So for him to kind of just like throw that out there, like I think he just kind of knew, like, well, you don't really know what to do in this situation. Let me help you out a bit. And I'm completely open to those kind of things, and it's just like I didn't need to necessarily be like in a coach kind of player situation. It was just like, we're just playing casuals, we're running sets, and it's just like, oh, don't press anything there, don't do this.
To tie into both of your guys' examples there, like sometimes Jess will just kind of walk in while I'm playing and start giving me shit. And what it does is like, because I'll get emotional or angsty or have an ego or whatnot, and it just knocks me down a peg. And it's like, oh yeah, she's giving me shit, and because she knows I'm pissed about it, and it levels me out and being like, yeah, this is not something to be worth. It reminds me, I'm angry about this, and that's taking space on my mental stack. That the anger is literally like a slot on my mental stack that's keeping me from reacting to an anti-air or something. And then she's got the unique way of knocking me out of that, or highlighting it or spotlighting it by giving me so much shit.
Yep.
Cool. Well, we are at about time right now. I wanted to ask AJ, do you have any shout outs on the way out here?
Shout out to Jenny, pretty much. I'm not really doing all that much competitively. I'm not coaching like to the general public as much anymore, but if I ever get back on, I'll probably open up a MetFi if this happens in the future and stuff. So maybe look out for me on there. I'm at skillsdeathkill6 on Twitter.
Nice. And I guess I'll go run through our normal spiel here. Our podcast can be found at twitch.tv/Spiral Series, youtube.com/Spiral Series, and Spotify by searching for Absolute Guard. I think I'm getting good at this. I think I've got it memorized now, and it doesn't sound too robotic yet. So, thanks.
That was a little robotic.
Damn it!
Yeah, damn it. Where's Jess to knock you down a peg?
Yeah, I need some coaching, guys. Have a good night. We'll talk to y'all later. See you next week.
Later, guys.